this S-Bus and P-Comp thing. So I know on the file it said the idea is you just kind of solo, I think it was P-Comp, and you should be able to hear. But when I hit play, I just don't hear anything.
Yeah, and that's bad directions. So first of all, in the directions, it should have said that you need to solo safe the S bus and the P comp bus, because if you go and solo any other track, if that S bus and P comp are not solo safed, then they get soft muted. So whereas your master fader will never do that because you don't have solo and mute functions on the master fader. But if you think about it, we're almost creating a second master fader by making the S bus everything go to the S bus.
Yeah.
Okay? So the flip of that is if you solo the S bus, go ahead and solo the S bus right now, or do it for the P comp because you were saying when you solo the P comp, right? So notice that. Now, do you notice how every other track, not only the S bus isn't, but you notice all the other tracks then are like there's the M button or the mute is
Yeah, they
somewhat
automatically
highlighted.
mute.
So
Gotcha.
those are what we call soft muting. So when you solo the P comp, it's muting all those individual tracks.
Okay.
So usually setting up the S bus and the P comp, it's usually the last step I do in a session, or I do it towards the end. I introduced it in the dynamics lab because it's just another way to deal with dynamics in a session, especially the macro dynamics of the whole thing. So in the instructions, it says to like solo the P comp so that you can hear its effect. So instead of doing that, what you could do is if you solo, so there's no real way you can hear it individually. So I think that's an erroneous step. I don't think you can listen to the P comp isolated.
Okay.
But what you can do is if you're listening to the entire mix, you can click on, it looks like you have it on bus 15 and 16. You can click on bus 15 and 16 and slowly bring that send level up while you're listening to the entire mix. And you'll audibly hear a difference in level when you're bringing up that P comp.
Okay. So in order to feel this, and you're saying for bus 15 and 16, that's going to the mix window. It's like, I don't think it's letting you see my mix window for some reason, but going to
Yeah,
the mix window and adjusting.
you got to share the desktop, not just Pro Tools.
Gotcha. So, stop share and then share desktop instead. Okay.
Great.
So are you saying when you say bring in 15 and 16, do you mean like adjust this mix here?
No, so that is the level. Okay, so what we've done is we've created a hierarchy here. So if you go back to the mix window, it's best explained in the mix window. So what we've done is, if you look, you've taken every track that you have in your session and you've sent it on bus 13 and 14. That's now going to the S bus, right? And then that S bus is going out what? Analog 1 and 2, right? Which is where your master fader is going out. So if you think about the signal flow, everything's coming through the S bus, and then it's going through that 7-band EQ, maximum and power dither that you have on your master fader, okay?
Yes.
What we're also doing is, via send 15 and 16, we're taking that S bus signal and we're creating two paths. So now, not only is it going to the master fader, but then it's first going to that BF76 that you have on the P comp, and then that entire thing is going to the master fader.
Gotcha.
So if you think about it, we've created almost two mixes now. We have your regular S-bus mix that has the stereo bus compression on the master fader, and then we have a separate mix that is in parallel that's compressing it via the BF76.
And
So the point of that, the reason we do that is that's going to bring the overall RMS level up. So if you do this, can you play it back, but maybe just turn down your headphones so you won't hear Pro Tools? All you'll do is you'll just see, stay in the mix window and just go ahead and press play somewhere. Okay, so you're just seeing the meters now?
yeah, I can hear it a little bit. Should I completely?
No, that's okay. As long as you can see the meters, that's fine. So do you see right now, like if we look at our master fader, do you see the level? The level's sort of, where is it peaking? Maybe it's peaking at like -6 or -4 maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah, it sometimes, look, it does go up to 0 at some point, okay?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Sometimes it does go up to 0. So go ahead, keep playing. Yep, you can just press the space bar, right? Yep. Cool. So it looks like at this point, sometimes it is going up to 0. Like here, when it gets really loud, it goes up to 0. And do you see how that little orange bar on the master fader is actually turning, it's showing some gain reduction there? Oh, stay in the mix window.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know. I'm sorry. It's just I don't know how to turn the volume down in Pro Tools without turning you down because then I can't hear you.
Yeah, so you're hearing me through your audio interface, is that correct?
Oh no, I have it both through. Okay, I see. I understand what you mean now. I have it both going through my headphones. That's why. So I should do preferences. Okay, I think that should be better.
All right, so am I coming out of your computer now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So then you can just, yeah, take your headphones off. Yep. So the idea is go back to the mix window and look at the meters. Okay, so do you see how sometimes it is, okay, so it looks like it's going up to 0, and a few times when it goes up to 0, do you see how that orange line to the right, it's indicating gain reduction?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now you have Maxim on there. So Maxim is actually turning stuff down. So Maxim is using, as a stereo bus, it's preventing anything from going above 0, and when it does approach 0, it reduces it in level.
And that's just the limiter, right?
Yeah, so and that's a great way to describe it, because all that's really happening there is it's just limiting the signal. Okay, it's not making it louder per se, it's just raising somewhat the level and then just bringing, just preventing it from clipping. Okay, so if we want to bring up the overall level, right now you still have bus 15 and 16 being sent to that parallel compression, right? So go ahead and click on send bus 15 and 16 there on the S-bus track. So your send, not your ins and outs. Okay, so see how you have it at 0 or at unity? So bring the level all the way down to infinity. Keep going. Cool. So what kind of effect does that have on your master fader? It doesn't have too much effect, but go ahead and like turn it all the way up. Yep. All right. It's already a pretty hot mix. So you should notice that this actually will create, oh, what are you doing with your BF76? Where do you have it at, like 18 and 18? Oh, your input's all the way down. Put it at 18 and 18. Yep, that's good. Cool, now bring it up. Cool. So go listen to that. How does that sound when you,
it's
do
definitely
nothing?
more compressed when it's up here. It's just like everything kind of.
Yeah, it just squishes everything. So when we're talking about that squishing or that stick of butter that a lot of pop music has, we're talking about RMS level or average level.
Gotcha.
So though the stereo bus Maxim or like an L1 limiter will prevent peaks or clips, because you have the out ceiling at negative 0.1 there, right? Yes. So you're saying anything louder than negative 2 dB, you're going to reduce. And then it's saying nothing can be, absolutely nothing can be louder than negative 0.1, which is why your master fader is not clipping the entire time. Okay. So you can use a brick wall limiter like this, like Maxim or L1, to prevent clipping and do some compression to the entire mix. But to bring the overall level up, you know, i.e. get that sort of radio Spotify sound, that like sort of compressed, really tight sound, this parallel compression comes into play, where you're going to send the mix to another track and compress it.
Gotcha. So the Maxim is, well, I guess first the what's called the P comp. So the parallel comp is like squishing it, and then the Maxim, and then kind of swishing it upwards, and then the Maxim is like kind of taking it to that top level. So that way it's smaller but higher volume-wise, right?
Yeah, you know, I hear, yes, that's absolutely correct. You know, and I hear comments often, like sometimes people say, well, I don't really use compression. Didn't you do a presentation where didn't the engineer said he doesn't really use compression or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, he didn't, but
someone did for mastering.
Often the statement is, I only used one compressor on this track. I didn't use 2. You know, I feel like that's, so when some people say like they don't use compression much at all, I'm just like, all right, well then the mix engineer or the mastering engineer that you send it off to uses tons of compression to make up for the fact that you did not. Because often even on a vocal, sometimes I'll just use a very basic compressor at the start is sort of like a limiter, where basically I say if the vocals get louder than -3, then it compresses it. So I can like take the tops off a vocal, like the
Mhm.
real loud parts, and then I may EQ and do some other stuff, and then after that adjust it again and use a compressor to sort of bring up the RMS level as well. So the question often is, should I use compression or not use compression? My question usually becomes, should I use one compressor or two for each track? And then I do the parallel, and then I also do stereo bus. So if you think about it, it's multiplicative. So it's not like I'm just adding like like four compressors does not equal four. It equals 40 or 400, depending on the ratios that I'm using, right?
Yeah.
So so you do want to like be careful with it, but the reason I set the lab up the way I did is that I wanted you all to have some experience with individual track compression as well as using it on the stereo bus and in parallel.
Cool.
So when you do your final project, you probably won't do these steps like the parallel compression and the stereo bus compression. I often ask students not to do that till the very end. Because usually you want to EQ, add time-based effects and compression on individual tracks first before you go ahead and do this sort of finalizing step, I call it.
Mhm.
So
Now, is this considered mastering, or is that this is
exactly.
like it is considered mastering? Okay, so
Yeah, yeah, and I hate to use that word because the people like mastering engineers, it's like this beautiful art. And if you think about it, a lot of times mastering engineers are doing the same process. They're taking the whole mix and compressing and limiting the whole mix, and then they're also sending it to parallel processing and compressing it as well. They're also adding EQ, spatialization, sometimes some mid-side effects as well. So they're doing all that, but 9 times out of 10, they're doing that outside of the box, and they're doing it on a compressor that costs about $5,000. And all it does is just compress a stereo track. So where our entire bundle of Pro Tools and all the gear that we have is about $1,000, a mastering engineer will usually have outboard gear that is just one compressor that does one thing really well.
gotcha.
So something like Lander, that's also what Lander, which is an online algorithm for mastering, it's doing something similar as well. It's using its algorithm to determine if it needs just stereo bus compression or if it needs to use some in parallel. I'm not even sure it's that sophisticated. It may just have a really gross algorithm that just says, let's make it loud. So,
I know I used eMastered for a while, but it was
yeah.
just weird. It would kind of mess with some of the frequencies a little bit, and you get it back and it'd be louder, but this frequency would be really loud and
Yeah.
came right all of a sudden. So
Yeah, and I think for a baseline analysis, a lot of that software is really good. And at eWorks up in or MWorks up in Cambridge, Jonathan Weiner, he's the mastering engineer there. He teaches at Berkeley. He's big into the Isotope suite of software because there's a lot of analysis tools in there. So he's always going on and on about how he uses those tools for analysis. But when it comes down to the final sort of mix and listening, he's using the experience that his ears have, and he's listening and saying, okay, well, according to the analysis, I've made it 5 times louder, but now the vocals sound horrible or the vocals are obnoxious.
mhm,
So then he goes in with his experience and says, okay, well, I'm going to turn it back a little bit. I'm going to turn it down. I'm going to do a little bit less.
got you.
So I think the future of like this analysis and software is going to be fantastic, and it's going to make our jobs a lot faster and a lot easier. But I still think there needs to be a responsible adult at the end of the mix to make decisions.